What's up, guys? So I know a lot of people have been hearing about how weak Druid was in the previous betas. While they might be a slow early game leveling class, they're really shaping up to be an absolute powerhouse in the late game. I'm not going to be going over specific builds in this video, but instead I'm going to be looking at the mechanics that really define what makes Druid so strong in the late game. So first up, we're going to be looking at potentially the most broken aspect in the entire game, aspect of the Rampaging Werebeast. Now, at first glance, this might not seem that crazy. It increases the duration of your Grizzly Rage ultimate skill by 1 to 5 seconds, but then the next line states that critical strikes while Grizzly Rage is active increase your critical strike damage by 10% for the duration. Now, we were unable to fully test this in-game, but based on the wording, there is a chance that this 10% stacking critical damage buff has no limit to it, meaning as many times as you can crit, every single time you'll be getting 10% critical strike damage for the entire duration of Grizzly Rage. Now on the flip side, this could maybe mean you only get 10% crit damage the first time you crit and that's it. We didn't get to test this, we're not sure, but the fact that it could scale infinitely is absolutely insane. The way I think this is balanced is normally during Grizzly Rage, you're only able to use Werebear skills. And Werebear skills are usually a lot slower, more spirit intensive, and you're hitting them not as often. But there are certain aspects and effects that you can add into Druid that really start to ramp this up. So first of all, it's based on crit, but there's actually a keystone, the capstone at the end of the Druid tree called Earthen Might, which has a chance on lucky hit to give you 100% crit chance for 5 seconds. So if you're able to activate that during this, all of your abilities will be critting. So getting past that first step is important. Now, there's also aspects that can alter your abilities. So for example, you could change Earth skills into Werebear skills, giving you access to more abilities that can proc the Earthen Might, which gives you, the 100% crit. There is also a aspect that changes Grizzly Rage into a Dire Werewolf transformation. And instead of having access to Earth and Werebear skills, we then gain access to Werewolf skills, which are known for attacking much quicker. On top of this, you can transform your storm skills into werewolf skills. So you can kind of see where this is going. You can switch from the very slow, methodical gameplay of the bear side into the faster werewolf side, getting more and more procs, more and more crits to really stack this up. I would definitely keep an eye out on this. I would be surprised if it is infinite and there is not a cap on it. I think Blizzard would hotfix this quite quickly if it was that strong. But this might possibly define Druid builds for the first part of the launch of the game. Next, we're going to take a look at the defensive side of the Druid as opposed to the offensive side. For a lot of these mechanics, they're going to look pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and not too crazy on the surface. The strength of these come from when you start applying them on top of each other and stacking them up. They really start to go crazy. So the first one we're going to look at is Fortify. For people that don't know, Fortify is a mechanic where through certain abilities, you can build up a sort of extra health bar over your health bar that will give you damage reduction. Not all classes have access to this, so that alone is really good for Druid. There are some ways you can increase the amount of damage reduction that Fortify gives you. It's 10% baseline. They did nerf the gems recently that gave Fortify damage reduction. Those are lower, but there are other ways to where if you have Fortify, you'll do increased damage. If you have Fortify, you'll take even less damage. So Fortify as a mechanic is quite good on its own, but nothing too crazy to write home about. Where Fortify starts to become really strong is when we bring barriers into the equation. Now, the way barriers work with Fortify is it actually protects both your life and your Fortify life. You'll only lose Fortify if your life goes down. So if you have a barrier protecting your life, you'll lose barrier but not Fortify. What this does is it'll keep your Fortify maxed and you'll maintain the damage reduction you have from Fortify while the enemies are hitting your barrier. Druid has a few ways to access barrier between Earthen Bulwark, and the unique item Temerity. Now, this item, the way it essentially works is anytime you're at full health, any healing you do will instead be converted into barrier, giving you a sort of overhealing effect. This is extremely good as Druid has multiple ways to heal itself between debilitating roar and the most important thing, the spirit boon, masochistic. Now, the way this reads is every time you crit, you will heal for 3%. Now, we're not sure if this is per ability or every single crit. So for example, if you use an AoE skill on 10 monsters and maybe 3 or 4 of them crit, does that count for 3 or 4 crits? We're not sure. Either way, even getting the 3% of your maximum life heal from a crit is extremely good for keeping up Temerity. I think this will be a very controversial unique item that classes that can take an advantage of this, it'll be extremely good and borderline overpowered. And like I said, the fact that this will now protect our life and fortified lives makes it easier to keep up maximum life, which lets us stack Temerity, and they kind of just cycle back into each other. The other thing that makes masochistic so strong, even though it's specifically shape-shifting skills, like I mentioned before, there's ways to convert your earth skills to werebear skills and your storm skills into werewolf skills, which then give it the shape-shifting tag, meaning any druid build you can turn into a shape-shifting build and take advantage of this. It'll be extremely strong, and you're going to want to look to put this in possibly any druid build you play. Looking at one other unique item, it's called the Melted Heart of Selig. Now, this recently got nerfed quite heavily, but is still extremely strong for Druid, and I could easily see this being one of the best hardcore builds in the game. What this does is it gives you more maximum resource. And basically, instead of taking damage, you drain your resource. Now, this seems kind of odd because a lot of people were seeing how Druid had spirit problems in the early game. Well, there's actually a build that Druid has access to where your main source of damage is your basic skills. And taking advantage of one of your best basic skills, Storm Strike, which also gives damage reduction, you can use both Claw and Storm Strike together with the unique Crone Staff. So what this does is you can walk around fighting monsters. You know, if you have Temerity, you've got your barrier up. Not only do you have your barrier up, if your barrier breaks, then instead of taking damage to your life, you'll take damage to your resource. So 1% life, if you get it all the way down to 3 resource each, you know, you can instantly get your spirit back up because you're just using basic attacks. There's also tons of ways to increase your maximum resource through the base skill tree, the Paragon tree, affixes on gear. This is going to be absolutely insane. I would be surprised if Druid isn't the absolute tankiest build in the entire game with this and Temerity. Sticking with the topic of defensive abilities, Druid is by far one of the best classes to have in group play. Reasons for this are Cyclone Armor will have an aspect that can apply to your entire party. Now, it did recently take a huge nerf, but it is still extremely good for party play. It will provide both physical and non-physical damage reduction to the party, and as you level up Cyclone Armor, the higher ranks you get, it gives more and more damage reduction. So a support focus build can really focus in on this. Now, that's not even the most crazy thing. We also have access to Hurricane, which I know there are a lot of memes about Hurricane, but Hurricane is much more of a utility and a defensive skill as it is a damage skill. It has the ability to reduce the damage that monsters are doing by 20%. You can get this to pretty close, if not a 100% uptime, and it's a pretty large AoE. Now, the most overpowered defensive ability recently got a buff, and that's Debilitating Roar. This is crazy. If you're going on a full support Druid build and you're focusing on that, you can get Debilitating Roar extremely high leveled, and each rank will reduce its cooldown. It's a 70% damage reduction for 4 seconds. But the thing is, it's not a damage reduction applied to you. You apply it to all the monsters around you. It's a nice large AoE, and you can also spec into it to have a 65% slow. Incredibly good for controlling monsters and reducing the damage they do. I think with the right setup, a support druid could very, very easily have 100% uptime on this. Now, even if you're not in a party, if you use these on a world boss and other people are fighting, both Cyclone Armor, Hurricane, Debilitating Roar, these will all help you as well. So even if you're not a support focused build and you're going to do some sort of grouped content like a world boss, don't be afraid to put these on your bar when you see like a big attack coming in. Put out Hurricane, use Debilitating Roar. Druids will be extremely valuable and extremely wanted if monsters are doing very, very high damage. Druids also bring a lot of control to the table. They have tons of ways to immobilize, stun, and even push enemies with the skill called Boulder. You can turn this into a core skill, meaning its only restriction is the spirit cost and not the cooldown. So if you're looking to group up mobs and push them into one area for your party, that's extremely good for that. There's lots of ways to immobilize mobs with lightning skills. One of the strongest basic skills, Storm Strike, gives you damage reduction and chance to immobilize, which is extremely good. You have Poison Creeper, which is a very large AoE immobilize. So Druid brings tons and tons of options to a group setting, from defensives and controlling the monsters. That'll be very important. So lastly, there's a couple things I want to talk about towards the end of the Druid skill tree that I'm going to group together. Mainly the ultimate skills and the capstones. So if we take a look at the ultimate skills first, the ultimate skills for the Druid are kind of underwhelming at first glance. Nothing too crazy to write home about. Decently long durations that did get reduced, which is very good because we have access to spirit boons, which is the Druid class mechanic, that are really going to help us out with these ultimates. Now, I think the goal is to have close to, if not 100% uptime on some of these ultimate skills, which would make them much, much stronger. So for example, in the spirit boons, there's one that increases the duration of the ultimate skills. And then there's another one that gives us a chance to reduce the cooldown of the ultimate skills. These both will help us get to 100% uptime because you also can get cooldown reduction as an affix on your gear. I think this is where a lot of the strength is going to lie, specifically as we talked about earlier with Grizzly Rage or the Dire Wolf version of it, where you'll be able to have very, very high uptime on these and continuously gain the bonuses from them. Taking a look at the capstones for Druid, a lot of them aren't really that interesting. They're just kind of bonus health, bonus damage, bonus attack speed. But there are two that particularly stand out to me. The first we talked about earlier, which was Earthen Might, which has a chance to give you 100% crit chance for 5 seconds. And then it has an increased chance against monsters that are crowd controlled or when you crit. So it kind of has a chance to loop into itself. What is going to make this extremely strong, in my opinion, is that there is an aspect that makes it so this can also apply to your storm skills and not just your earth skills. And storm skills are much faster hitting, much quicker attacks. I think that's really where it's going to shine and you're going to be able to take advantage of it. I think it's balanced around the slower hitting werebear and earth side. So I'm surprised they put an aspect like this in, but I'm really excited to try this out. Now, the other one that is kind of interesting actually is Nature's Fury. It gives you a chance to cast an ability from the same category when you use an ability. Now, there's a lot we're not sure about this. Does this mean it can cast any ability? So for example, if you use Tornado, will it cast Lightning Storm or Landslide? Maybe it'll only cast abilities you've put skill points into. So if you put points into Tornado, maybe, and then you put points into Landslide, you can cast Landslides when you cast Tornado and vice versa. We're not entirely sure. Maybe it only casts level 1. So it's not too bad at first. What makes this really, really cool, again, is an aspect. The symbiotic aspect. Basically, whenever you activate Nature's Fury, your non-ultimate cooldowns are reduced. This really starts to get crazy because when you think about it, if you proc Nature's Fury and reduce your cooldowns of your abilities, you can then use your abilities, which each have a chance to proc Nature's Fury, and then Symbiotic Aspect will activate. It won't work on your ultimates, but things like Trample, Hurricane, your defensive skills, Debilitating Roar, Earthen Bulwark, Blood Howl, all of these can activate, and then when you lower the cooldown of them, you can activate them. You see what I mean? It kind of like goes into a loop. There's a lot of these things where it feels like you can kind of keep resetting each of them. So I think this will be one of the other big key builds that you should definitely keep an eye on and that can definitely be abused. Now, you see the cooldown is 4 to 8 seconds. That's not on an amulet or a two-hander. If you put it on a two-hander, it gets doubled. You're looking at up to 16 seconds removed from some of these abilities. If you maybe go for like a really fast hitting basic attack that you can use, and then you're trying to just proc Nature's Fury and then keep using one of your cooldowns over and over again, I think there could be something really, really strong there. Now, remember, we haven't tested a lot of these things. This is all just theory crafting and kind of getting a feel for what's going to be strong. None of this might function the way we think it does. There might be something none of us could even think of that's going to be extremely strong. The one thing I can say for sure is, while a lot of people know that Druid isn't super strong early, I think it has tons of options, tons of builds, lots of ways to be really, really strong later in the game. So if you really like the class, I really recommend sticking it out, and you're going to enjoy it. There's going to be something you can do. I'm going to be making tons of builds and guides for Druid specifically. So if you have any questions about the class at all, leave them down in the comment section below. I love to interact and answer anything I can. And if I don't know the answer, I will definitely try to figure it out. So until next time, I'll see you guys later.